Masechet Yoma, Daf Lamed Bet, Lev 32. Tonight we're going to be discussing a long midrash. It's from Torat Kohanim, also known as the Sifra. That's the Tanaitic midrash, halachic midrash on Sefer Vayikra. And the topic is, what's the source for, number one, immersing between every change of clothes, and furthermore, for rinsing hands and feet, called Kiddush, Yadayim V'Raglayim, also before and after each of those tevilot, to make up 5 tevilot and 10 times rinsing hands and feet. And we're going to see 2 opinions for each, how we derive it. Basically, everybody agrees on the order, and that there are 5 and 10, but 2 different ways of deriving them. If we look at the Pisukim themselves, which is always important to do before reading the Sifra, to see what kinds of questions it's bringing up, we'll see that right at the beginning, it mentions, this is Acharemot, right at the beginning it mentions that the Kohen is going to change his clothes and put on the Bigdei Bad. This is the white linen clothing, 4 garments that are used for the service of the specific service of Yom Kippur. And he's going to wear all those, and it says here, Bigdei Kodeshem is going to be an important phrase, right? These are holy garments, meaning not only the gold ones, these also are holy garments. He washes himself, that means a mikveh, and then he wears them. So he has to first wash and then put on the white garments. So this is the beginning of the Yom Kippur service. And then you see he goes right into the Shnei Asirim, and he brings the machta with the Ketoret, and he sprinkles the blood that's going to be inside the Kodesh and Kodesh Kodashim. So the whole thing is everything is going to do for Yom Kippur service. And then almost at the end of the chapter, it says he comes to Ohel Moed. We're going to discuss this. This is the beginning. What does that mean? Is coming to Ohel Moed? Ohel Moed is the same as saying Kodesh Kodashim in the Bet HaMikdash. So why is he going there? We'll see. And then he removes his clothing, Bigdei Habad, the white linen clothing, and he leaves them there, and he washes again the Rachas Besro B'Mayim. And then he goes and he does Olato, Olat Ta'am, Chipet Bado, and does the other sacrifices, the Korban, the Tamid Shel Ben Harbayim, the Musaf. Okay, so that's all. If we just had the Pshat, if we just looked at the Pesukim, it seems that there's only 2 changes of clothing, right? He's going to wear some kind of gold in the morning when he does the Tamid Shel Shachar. It's not mentioned in this chapter because it's not chapters. This chapter is only focusing on Yom Kippur service. So he's wearing the golden clothing, and then he'll change to put on the white clothing, do all the Yom Kippur, and then finish, put back on the golden clothing, and finish the rest of the day, like the next pasuk says. I'll put that on the mizbeach, and the rest of everything that needs to be done. So therefore, here I have a little chart here. In the Peshat, right, the simple reading is, you have the morning Tamid in golden clothing. I made it and highlighted in gold. Yom Kippur in white clothing. It's highlighted in white, as you can see. And Musaf, afternoon service, back in gold. So there's only 2 changings, only 2 commas here. Each comma is a changing. So basically, it only explicitly talks about twice that he would have to go to the mikveh. You could add 1 in the morning when he first gets dressed, which is every day he would have to come and go to the mikveh before he starts. So really, according to Peshat, there's only 3 times. So we're going to have to figure out why we think it's 5 times and that there's an extra change. I'll tell you what it is now, so it'll be easier. The extra change is, this is the same, and then bringing the Ketoret inside the Kodesh Kodashim is 1, and he leaves it there, goes back out to sacrifice the 2 rams that are required, part of the Musaf, and then he goes back in afterwards to take out the kavamachta. So in the Peshat, it sounds like he puts it in, does everything there, and removes it right away, maybe after a few minutes. But according to Torah Shebe'al Peh, no, leave it in there, do something else while it's burning out, and then come back and change again. So therefore you have the morning one plus 5 commas here. So 5 changes of clothes, that's 5 tevilot. And with each one, two rinsing of the hands and feet. So that's 10 times altogether. Okay, good. Now I think we are ready to jump right in. Tano Rabanan, Uba Aharon El Ohel Moed. In Pasuk 23 at the end of the chapter, Aharon comes to Ohel Moed. Lama Huba, why is he going in there? It doesn't say what he does. So this is referring to his removal of the kaf and machta, right? He comes in with these two items, with the coals and the incense. He puts it on and he puts it down there. Now he has to go back and remove it. That's the extra step there. So haparasha kula ne'emra ala seder chutz mi pasuk zeh. And this is very interesting. Everything is in chronological order except for this pasuk, right? As we see, right? It looks like he does everything before. Even would let's assume that this is we go with this interpretation. Here he's taking it out. If we read this in chronological order, then he would be taking this out and then changing to the golden clothes, and then he wouldn't have to go back in. But he says no, this is out of order. This ubaharon has to be afterwards. After he changes to the golden clothes, then he's going to do whatever he does, change back into white clothes to go back into and do this ubaharon el ohel moed. So that's out of order. That's where you're going to have 5. Good. So now my ta'ama. What is the source for this? Here it is. Amar Rav Hisda gemidi 5 tevilot ו10 קידושין טובל כהן גדול מקדש בו ביום. ואי כסדרן למה שכחתו אלא 3 tevilot ו6 קידושין. Rav Hisda says the source is gemidi, meaning it's a tradition, part of Torah Shebaal Peh. We learned that, right? This is an old tradition that there has to be 5 tevilot and 10 kiddushin on that day. And if we follow that the pesukim in order, as in chronological order, then you only have 3 tevilot, as we said, 1 in the morning, 1 when he changes from gold to white, does all the Yom Kippur service, including bringing it in and taking out the shovel, and then changing back to gold. So that's only 3 tevilot. But we have a tradition that is not so. This is an amazing thing that this is a lot of times we talk about, are they deriving things from the pasuk or reading in? Here it's a clear case where the midrash is reading in. They already have a tradition beforehand, and they're like, well, we have to fit it into the pasukim. Therefore, we have to take this pasuk 23 and move it, right? And say it's out of chronological order. Okay, so we have we always are discussing this question. This is a very good example because it's explicit that we have the tradition first and we're reading in the midrash afterwards. All right, now that we quoted this tradition here, 5 tevilot, where does this come from? It actually comes from a very long baraita, and we're gonna learn the entire long baraita. The structure of this of today's daf is very interesting. We first quote the entire long baraita, and then we're going to quote it piece by piece and discuss each section. So there's going to be some repetition. Now you know why there's some repetition. We're just quoting this one. So here it is. Tanya. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. When we say Rabbi Yehuda, that means Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai. He's a 4th generation Tana, as opposed to Rabbi. Rabbi is Rabbi Yehuda ha-Nasi, who's 5th generation. Both of them are Rabbi Yehuda, right? But they are 2 different people. So, and we're going to see both of their opinions. So keep them straight. Rabbi Yehuda, the 4th generation, but Ilai says, "Minayin le5 tevilot ו10 קידושין שטובל כהן גדול מקדש בו ביום." What is the source that there should be 5 times that he immerses in the mikveh and 10 times he rinses on Yom Kippur? Tamid lomar. ובא אהרון אל אוהל מועד ופשט את בגדי הבד ורחץ בשרו במים במקום טהור ולבש את בגדיו ויעשה ועשה. So he's learning it from Pesukim 23 and 24, ending at the end, right after he does the Yom Kippur service. It says there that he switches from white to golden garments, and then he washes, right? He washes and puts on the golden garments, and then he goes out and does the next part of the service. So we see from here, halamadeta shekol mishaneh me'avodah la'avodah ta'on tevila. Since it says v'yasa ve'asa, he can only start doing the next part of the service when he immerses himself. So we learn from here that every time you go from one type of service, meaning the one in the Kodesh Kodashim for Yom Kippur, to another kind of service, meaning outside, then that would be for a regular day, which includes changing clothing. Anytime you transition, you have to do tevilah. And how many times is that? Well, it's 5 times, as we're going to see. So this is the source that you have to do tevilah after each and every one. Good. So he learns it from the end of the paragraph, or the end of the perek. Amar Rabbi, minayin lechamesh tevilot v'asara kiddushin shotobel k'kohen gadol mekadesh bo bayom, shemar ketoret bad kodesh yilbash u'michnaseh bad yu al besaro u'babnet bad yachkor misnefet bad yisnof bigdei kodesh hem v'rachas b'mayim et besaro u'lebesham. He's learning it from the beginning of the paragraph, pasuk 4, which describes when he changes from the golden clothes, which he uses for Tamid Shel Shachar, to the white clothing, which will be for Yom Kippur. So he's learning it from the beginning of the paragraph. Okay, we're going to have to ask for the Yehuda. I know you learned it from the last paragraph when he goes from white to gold. So now all I know is that when you go from white to gold, you have to do Tevilah. How do you know the other way around if you go from gold to white? Maybe not. Okay, we're going to ask that later. But right now we're going to ask that here. Tevilah vahomer bigdei kodesh hem hukshu kol habegadim kulan ze lazeh. Because in pasuk 4, right, I highlighted those words beforehand. I said pay attention to those words. Here on pasuk 4 at the beginning, bigdei kodesh hem. Why do you have to add these words? These are like extra words, right? Change put on all these bigdei bad. They are holy clothing. Of course they're holy clothing. I mean, that's why you're putting them on, right? And so why do you have to say that? It's to compare and all of the holy clothing together. That just like holy clothing one way and the other way, they're both holy, and therefore you'd have to do Tevilah both ways. So that's how the B learns it. I'm going to go to my outline, right? So source for immersing between changing clothes, the Yehuda says is from the end of the perek, Pesukim 23-24. The B, ha-Nasi, from the beginning of the perek, from Pasuk 4. Both of them talk about immersion. So one focuses on one focuses on the other. Okay, good. Now since we know that every time they change avodah, they have to immerse. How many changing of avodot are there? How many avodot are there? 5 avodot 10. Tamid shel shachar bebigdei zahav. Avodat hayom bebigdei lavan. Right. This is when we started the daf today. We said there's a tradition. This is it. Right. This is the main source. So you do Tamid shel shachar like you do every day. So that's bigdei zahav, the same ones that the Kohen wears all year round, the 8 pieces of clothing. And then the one that's special for Yom Kippur in the Kodesh Kodashim, that's bigdei lavan. Elo ve'el ha'am bebigdei zahav. Then he does his ayil and the ayil for the am, although these are special for Yom Kippur, but this is part of the Musaf. They're not specifically in the Kodesh Kodashim for kapara. So these are done with bigdei zahav, the regular clothes, so that's the third. Kaf machta bebigdei lavan. Now he just has to go back into Kodesh Kodashim to remove the shovel, and so that's bigdei lavan again. And then he has to change back to bigdei zahav, to bishul ben arbaim bebigdei zahav. So there you go. That's the 5. All right. So now that we understand the 5 tevilot, minayin shekol tevilot silicha shenei kiddushin. Right. The Pesukim actually do not explicitly talk about sanctifying hands and feet. They only say lavash besaro b'mayim. So how do we know that? Okay, Tamud lomar ufashat verachatz velavash. So it doesn't say whose opinion this is, but we're still in the B. That's like we're continuing. So according to the B, we use pasuk 4 to learn immersion. Pasuk 23-24, he didn't use yet for anything. So what do you need to tell me again? Right? I already know from Pasuk 4 that you have to go to the mikveh every time you change, either way, right? Because it says bigdei kodesh. So what are these extra Pesukim? Oh, it's not talking about immersion. It's talking about rinsing hands and feet, right? So how do we know? And within those Pesukim, there's the word rachatz is in the middle of the undressing and the dressing. So therefore, he learns that when you dress, then you sprinkle, then you do Kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, and then you do Kiddush v'raglayim again, and you put on the clothing. Okay, we're going to talk about this order, which sounds like it's always the washing is in the middle. We're going to get to that at the end of the daf. Good. Now, second opinion about that, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Omer. We might expect to look for you to be Yehuda. We have Rabbi. What about Rabbi Yehuda? We're going to say that Rabbi Yehuda must agree with these 2 opinions. This one opinion, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, that's one Tana, 5th generation, and he says, Kal vahomer u'ma b'makom she'en ta'on tevilah, ta'on kiddush. Okay, in a place where you don't actually have to do tevilah. That's talking about in the very beginning of the day. Whenever a Kohen first comes, he has to do tevilah, as we said on previous dapim. And remember, according to the Yehuda, so this fits with the Yehuda, he's the opinion that said, listen, you don't really have to. It's only Rabanan as a reminder to make sure that you were not tameh beforehand. So in such a case, when you don't really need tevilah, but yet you have to do Kiddush, right? Everyone agrees that you have to wash your hands and feet before you come to the Beit HaMikdash. If you don't, everything you do is pasul. So even though you're also doing tevilah, you have to do, in the case when you don't actually have to do tevilah, you have to do Kiddush. Shamakom shetahon tevilah and odin shetahon Kiddush. So in a place where you do have to do tevilah, right? And we learned that from we learned that from the Pesukim later on, the end of the paragraph. So all the more so you'd have to do Kiddush. Okay, this is not the best kal vachomer because you could say, well, tevilah maybe is more than Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim, so you don't have to do it because you're doing something greater. Okay, but anyway, we're thinking of it here as two separate things, and so we're learning it from a kal vachomer. But we question it. Ima lahalan Kiddush echad, afkan Kiddush echad. Yeah, but if you're learning it from the first thing he does in the morning, he only does Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim once, right? Because he's taking off his pajamas, which he doesn't have to do Kiddush for that. That's just big dechol. So he only has to do it once. So maybe if I learned from this kal vachomer, I would only know that each time he gets dressed, he has to do Kiddush. So it'll only be 5 tevilot and 5 Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim, not 10 of them. So how do we know it's double? You see the words asher lavash? He takes off the linen clothing that he was wearing. What do you mean? Of course, if he's taking them off, obviously he was wearing them, just to leave out those words. Why do you need them? Obviously, a person can only take off what he was already wearing. Rather, let's make a hekesh, just like when you take off clothing. So just like when you put on clothing, you have to do Kiddush. So too, when you take off clothing, and that's the doubling. That's why every time you have to do 2. So that's 5 immersions and 10 times Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim. Right, good. So now that is the end of the Braita. To summarize, right, we had 2 opinions. Rabbi Yehuda learns that you'd have to do immerse from the end of the paragraph, and he'll end up agreeing with the Elazar, or rather the Elazar will agree with him, next generation, that we learn the rinsing of the hands from this kal vachomer, right, from the beginning of the day, plus the word asher lavash, which tells me that it's 2 for each one. And so that's one way of learning it. The B is in a way simpler. He can simply learn the fact that you have to immerse from verse 4, and then verse 23, 24 at the end of the day are extra, and so that is where he learns Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim. And now we will go back and explain each section further. So the beginning of the Braita was Amar Rabbi Yehuda. This is like a chazara. How do we know they have to do tevilah every time you change? Tevilah every time you change services. Right? You see at the end of the chapter, when he changes from white to gold, he has to wash. He's changing from one service to another, he does tevilah. Good. Ashkechan, that's the end of the Braita. Ashkechan b'bigdei lavan b'bigdei zahav. Bigdei zahav b'bigdei lavan minayin. Well, all I learned from there is that when I go from white to gold, I have to do tevilah. How do you know that from every time I go from gold to white, you also have to do tevilah? This pasuk only gives one of the examples. So we'll learn it from maybe another Braita. Tana diber Rabbi Ishmael. Kal vachomer. Ma bigdei zahav she'en kohen nichnas behen lifnai v'lifnim. Ta'on tevilah. When you're going to put on the golden clothing, right, which kohen cannot use the golden clothes to go into the Kodesh Kodashim. And yet, that requires tevilah when he puts on the golden clothing. So the white clothing, which is now, more important, he goes into Kodesh Kodashim with it. And Odin Sheton tevilah, all the more so, he's going to require tevilah when he goes in. So that's how we learn it from a kal vachomer. But no, we question that. We can reject this kal vachomer. Ma lebigdei zahav sheken kaparatan merubah. Bigdei zahav, the Kohen Gadol wears them all year round, 365 days. So they have a lot of kapara. So they're on a higher level. Maybe those are on a higher level. He has to do he has to do tevilah before. But the white clothing he just wears for one day, not even for the whole day. It's only for specific sins that have to do with the cleansing the temple itself. So that is maybe less important. So I can't really learn from this kava chomed. Both are chomed in one way or another. Now this is very interesting. We're saying, you know what, we're going to give up on this line of reasoning. And when the Yehuda here says he learns it from 23:24, he can only learn it one way. How's he going to learn it the other way? He has to end up agreeing with Rabbi. Okay, I don't think he's abandoning his original citation. Rather, he's going to use both verses. The end of it, when he's going from white to gold. So from these Pesukim, you learn from that you have to do tevilah when you go from white to gold. And from the verse 4, that's when he goes and puts on the gold. So from there we learn that when you go from, that's what he puts on the white. When you go from gold to white, that's what we learn that you have to do tevilah. So he actually, Rabbi Yehuda, Ilai is going to use both Pesukim for learning immersion each way. Okay, good. Now we're going to quote the next part of the Baraita. Amadabi, minayin lechamesh tevilot v'asara kiddush to bekohen gadol mekadesh bo bayom to melomar ketoret bad kodesh yilbash. So he learns it from the beginning pasuk. Halamat hashkol meshanem avodah la'avodah ta'on tevilah. That's how we learn it. Good. So that's the end of the quote. Ashkechan b'bigdei zahav lebigdei laban. Bigdei laban lebigdei zahav minayin. Okay, so now since he's learning from the beginning of the paragraph, that's when he changes from gold to white. How does he know white to gold? So we're going to try the same kava chomed. Obviously, it's not going to work. Didn't work that time. But we're going to turn it around. So since when you go from gold to white, when you put on the white, and the white does not have a lot of kapara, because you only use it for one day, only for a little bit, and it requires to be lebek. There's a hab. So putting on the gold, which I use all year round, has a lot of kapara. So that's all the more so you should require tevilah. So can I just learn it from a kava chomed? No, we can refute at that one. Maybe are more important because you use them to go into kodesh kodashim. Because I have never, and so those are more important. So how do you know? That's why that the original Baraita continues and says, since the extra words, bigdei kodeshem. What do I have to know? I know that they're holy garments. So to teach you that all the garments are holy and they're holy in the same way. So just like when you change from one way, you have to do tevilah. So to the other way, you also have to do tevilah. All right, so now we solved that. Now we're going to quote the next part of the Baraita. We're not going to say anything about this part. Those are the 5 steps. And then the Baraita continues and says, okay, we learned above that we got the source for doing tevilah. How do you know every tevilah requires 2 kiddushin before and after? Ufashat verachatz velavash. Right, since it has the word rachatz in between the undressing and the dressing, so that's 2, right? You have to do it both times. Hi, betvilah ketib. Hold on, what are you talking? How are we going to learn rechitza, just the washing of the hands and feet? Look in the context. This is talking about doing tevilah. So how could you learn it from here? And this is all within the Rabbi. It says im eno inyan. Im eno inyan is one of the methodologies that the Midrash uses. That if there's something that's a law in one context, but it's not needed for this context, then we transfer it to a different context altogether. So here, we already learned tevilah both ways, right? As we saw above. So we don't need this pasuk at all. So therefore, if it's not talking about tevilah, the nafkale bigdei kodesh, we learn it from bigdei kodeshem. So instead, to know anyan kiddush, so apply this to kiddush adam v'raglayim, that has to be done before and after. So you're right, it's not explicit, but we're going to use these words that we don't need for kiddush adam v'raglayim. Okay, now we have a good question. If you mean this pasuk, the one at the end of the paragraph, at the end of the perek, it's talking about Kiddush, why doesn't the Torah say so? And he should also do Kiddush before Fashat, V'Kidesh Yadav V'Raglav, right? Why use a word that's misleading? Say what you mean what you say. Hakamash ma'lan the tevilah kiddush. No, it's on purpose to teach you something else. That there's a comparison between tevilah and kiddush. Ma kiddush makom kadosh, af tevilah makom kadosh. Just like kiddush adam reglaim has to be in the courtyard. That's where the kiyod is. That's where it's done. So too the tevilah is going to be done in the courtyard. Don't go out of the courtyard and do it there. Use the mikveh that's in the courtyard, right? As we saw, the one that's on the second story there. Okay, good. So now we're good. We saw the B and where he gets this from. Now we're going to go back. Now we're wondering about the Yehuda. Right, the Yehuda, he used these pesukim to learn. Well, he needs both of them really to learn immersion in itself. So he can't say imeno anyan, right? So how is the Yehuda going to derive that you have to rinse your hands and feet twice? So we're going to see that the Yehuda must agree with the Elazar. This entire Braita has a chiastic structure, right? The B is in the middle, and these other opinions are parallel on the outside, and they agree with each other. So, Rabbi Yehuda, Kiddush minaleh, nafkaleh, mid Rabbi Elazar, mid Rabbi Shimon. He learns it from Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Shimon. All right, so that concludes the analysis, the piece-by-piece analysis of the Midrash. And now we're going to ask another question about the order. This is a continuation from yesterday. If you remember yesterday, we saw that there's an opinion, but there's a disagreement between Rabanan and Rabbi Meir. Rabanan say, when every time you change, you should follow this order. First you do Kiddush Yadayim B'Raglayim, then you undress, then immerse in the mikveh, then dress, and then do Kiddush again. So the Kiddush is always done when one is dressed, because you're still dressed here, right? Undress, dress, and then, right, you dressed here when you do it. So it's a chiasm, Kiddush beginning and end. Rabbi Meir, on the other hand, said no. The Kiddush has to do more directly with the dressing. It's before and after the dressing. So the undressing is done first, and then the Kiddush, and then the dressing, and then the Kiddush. So Kiddush is always second afterwards. So those are the two opinions we already saw. Now we're going to wonder about Rabbi. Who can Rabbi agree with? Because if you read what he just said in the Braita, it looks like he would say undress first, then Kiddush, then immerse, then Kiddush, and then dress. So this is not like any of the opinions, right? Why do we think he would say that? Because look at the words that Rabbi said above, right? Where's he learning here from? Ufashat v'rachatz. That sounds like undress first, and then wash, and then it says uvelavash v'rachatz v'lavash, wash, and then dress, right? So you see the both Kiddushes are in the middle. So this is Rav Hisda's point. Amar Rav Hisda, Rabbi Meir, Rabanan. Rabbi's opinion must not agree with either Rabbi Meir and also not with Rabanan. How so? Rabanan's principle is that you're always going to be dressed when you're doing Kiddush. Therefore, that's going to be first and last. And Rabbi said the opposite. It's only when he's undressed that he does Kiddush. Right? They're both, it's after he gets undressed and before he gets dressed. So that doesn't work. It can't be to be because they would agree regarding the first one, but regarding the second one, the one after Tevilah, Rabbi Meir says, once he's dressed, then he does Kiddush. Whereas Rabbi says that he, when he's undressed, he does Kiddush Adam and then he gets dressed after. So Rabbi is a third opinion that does not agree with either. Rav disagrees with Rav Hisda's take on this. He says, no, everyone will agree, even Rabbi, that on the second Kiddush, meaning after Tevilah, that you first get dressed and then you make Kadesh. And why do we know that? Even though the pasuk before that he quoted sounds the opposite. From another pasuk, is in Shemot, O b'gishtam el hamizbeach. When the Kohanim approach the altar, they should wash their hands and feet and not die. Now, so that means that this is the last thing that they're going to do. So who can approach? Only someone who's who should do Kiddush Adam v'Raglayim. Only someone whose only thing that has nothing else left to do besides approaching. So in other words, the last thing you should do before coming to do the service is Kiddush, and not someone who has to also get dressed and come close. No, get dressed first. So that's the source. Everyone agrees get dressed first, and then come close. So according to that, you switch these around, and according to that, Rabbi actually agrees with Rabbi Meir. Last point about this topic. La Rav Hisda itle de Rav Acha. Rav Acha itle de Rav Hisda. These two opinions we saw above, they are mutually exclusive. How do you know? Because if you add both of them, if you agree with both of them, then you're going to need 15 times to do the Kiddush Adam and Aglaim. In other words, if you agree with both of them, then you're going to do a Kiddush before you get dressed, right? That's what Rav Hisda says. And after dressing, which is the Rav Acha's opinion. And then you'd have to have 3, right? Kiddush here, another Kiddush here, another Kiddush here. That would be 3 times for every immersion, and 5 immersions would be 15. But nobody ever said that, so that cannot be possible. All right, so that concludes this fascinating Torat Kohanim. And now we have a short discussion on the next part of the Mishnah, which is Hevi'u lo Tamid Qeraso. So once the Kohen Gadol gets dressed, the first thing he's going to do is to do the shechita on the Korban Tamid Shel Shachar. But he doesn't do a full shechita like normally. Rather, he uses this word Qeraso. All right, he just does just enough. Right? Remember that the Kohen Gadol has to do all the services. So he does just enough and then runs around to catch the blood. Right? It's like, playing catch with you have to throw it and catch the ball. This is not easy to do. So now this is an unusual word. So we ask, "My keraso amad ola lishna diktalahu." It's a language of killing, slaughtering. Amad Nachman bar Yitzchak, "My kera Ilai yefefia Misraim Peres misafon ba." Here they're opening their concordance. Right, and they're saying, where else does this word appear? Right, maybe we can learn what the word means. It's sure enough, it appears in Yirmiyah about this calf, beautiful calf is Egypt, comparing Egypt to a calf, and a keretz is going to come from the north. So, my mashma, Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef translated this to Aramaic, and we can understand what it means from the Aramaic. Malkaya ehava Misraim. This eglah, the calf, is representative, meaning a king. Misraim is a beautiful king. However, amamin katolin misipuna yetun ala, but killer nations will come from the north upon Egypt. So you see that the word keres is translated as killer. That's how we know. So it means killer. It means to kill the animal. Keraso bechama marula berob shenayim. So what does, when they say killing it? How many? In other words, how much of the throat is he cutting? He says the majority of both the esophagus and the windpipe, right? That is the minimum. You don't have to chop the entire animal's head off. You just have to sever the majority of both of those pipes. Good. Then everybody agrees to this. Rav Hanan agrees. Most of the majority of the two. Even the Shakish agrees. Most of these two. What do you mean even the Shakish? Because you might have thought otherwise. The Shakish in Masechet Chulin had a question. Since we know that the halacha is the majority of one pipe is the same as the whole pipe. You don't have to do the whole thing, right? Miksato kekula. So since we know that principle, why do we also need yet another Tanaitic statement to teach me that the majority of one in a bird you only have to do majority of one, but for an animal you have to do majority of two. Like, isn't that obvious? If a majority of one pipe is the same as the whole, well, that's good for a bird when you only have to do one. So isn't that obvious for an animal where you have to sever two? It's the majority of both of them. So this seems obvious. But yet we need both of these Tanaitic statements because of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah might have misled you. Tamid keraso merek acher shechita al yado v'kibel et adam uzrako. Because our Mishnah says that the Kohen Gadol brings the Korban Tamid, he does the keraso, cuts the majority of both of the pipes, and someone else comes and does merek, meaning continues to cut, and finishes the shechita, but with another person, and the Kohen Gadol, another Kohen, and the Kohen Gadol will go around and accept the blood, right? Because the Kohen Gadol has to do all of the services on this day. So now, if you said that, the question is, why does another Kohen have to continue the shechita? If you think that it's enough to sever the majority of both of them, then that should be enough. And the fact that this Mishnah says another Kohen has to go and continue the shechita, you might have thought that a majority is not sufficient. So yachol lo merek yehe pasul. So maybe I would think that if I didn't do the merek, meaning the finishing off of the cutting of the pipes, that it would be pasul. Okay, now we're going to open a parentheses on this word. Right, there's a later commentary on this assumption here. Wait a second. Could anybody really think that if you didn't do the medika, if you didn't finish the shechita, it would be pasul? If so, it would be self-defeating, because if the Kohen Gadol is not doing it, then someone else is doing it, and no one else can do anything. Everything on Yom Kippur has to be done by the Kohen Gadol. So if you thought it was really necessary to do the full shechita, and then it wouldn't help for another Kohen to come and finish it off, because another Kohen can't do it. It has to be himself. Therefore, it's kind of obvious that this is not a necessary thing to do. So hachikama, this is what he meant to say when he asked that question. Yachol ya pasul midrabanan. Okay, adding the word midrabanan. All right, so now back to our main question, right? Our main point here. That Resh Lakish is going ahead here and saying, right, since I have one principle that says majority of one is like the whole thing, why didn't you tell me the majority of two is also like the whole thing? Because I might have thought otherwise, because our Mishnah says another Kohen has to come and finish off the shechita, and I might have thought maybe midrabanan it's pasul. That's why I needed that second Tanaitic statement to tell me that it works for two also, right? All you need is the majority of two. So really, the truth is, the Kohen Gadol could go and do the majority of two and have nobody finish the rest of them, and he'll then just go and collect the blood, right? And you don't, right? And then, I mean, later on, they're gonna cut the whole thing into limbs, but you don't need to do that now. So really, so no one needs to do it. So now they answered all the questions so well. So in fact, if you don't need to do it, not even midrabanan, it won't make it pasul if you don't finish off cutting the two pipes. So why do it at all? The answer is mitzvah l'marek. It's still a mitzvah. It's a good thing to do. There might be several reasons why you want to do that. One is that more blood comes out when you completely sever. It comes out faster. And Kohen Gadol, right? He doesn't want to lose out the blood, so he's going to cut it just enough. And then when he goes and gets the cup, then the other Kohen will cut it more, and then the rest of the blood will flow out. He doesn't, he has a lot to do. We could he collect the blood more quickly, and then he could then quickly take it to the Mizbeach. And so that explains the Mishnah why he should do the majority, but doesn't finish, and another Kohen finishes it off for him. Baruch Adonai L'olam. Amen ve'amen.